Let's dive right in with the action on accessory dwellings. We've been talking about this kind of on and off, here and there for several different actions over several years. What's this latest move?
Well, the latest is a pretty big deal. We have now the ability for people to construct new detached buildings, so buildings not a part of their existing residence, and to make them available for use as a dwelling for up to 3 people. So prior to this action, people had the ability to utilize space within their own existing homes. So we liberalized it so that you could use your entire basement, for example, for accessory use. And then we allowed for the ability for existing detached buildings to be converted to accessory use. Now we've made that process easier, and then also allowed for the very first time you can construct a new building for an accessory use, provided that it meets some key requirements that we set at our meeting.
Yeah, and one of the issues last year when we were looking at it is that you can use existing buildings, and that made sense. There's something there, you should be able to use it. But existing buildings include garages, which can be like 1 foot, basically right on the property line.
Right.
And we realized if we use that same standard for people to construct new, you know, people could have their yard and suddenly find their neighbors putting something like right there, and we didn't feel really comfortable with that. So we went back and did some study and looking at it and actually settled on 5 feet so that there is some space, and you can get plantings in there, you can move a lawnmower through and things like that. So that was sort of what the major crux was, I think, of our discussion.
Indeed.
So are we talking kind of like the old in-law quarters, as they used to be called, type thing for these accessory dwellings, kind of renovating the garage or something like that?
That's right.
Yeah, or building something new that looks that looks nice. You know, and one of the other issues is that our zoning code requires 8 feet of separation between the main building and the accessory building. And then we started to wonder, how is this accessory building going to affect trees? That was actually one of the things that came into this, which I think years ago when we started talking about it, people weren't thinking about trees a whole lot. But there's concern that somebody would, like, you know, in order to build a thing, will cut down trees. And plus with that 5 feet, and then you can go to the zoning board and ask for, you know, is it a waiver? Is that what variance? Thank you. That's the correct word. A variance to do less than the 8 feet. We want to make sure people understand that, and particularly for a good reason, like there's a beautiful tree here. We want to keep that tree. If we move a little closer to the house, we can keep the tree. And that's how we're hoping that people will use this, just to be a little more sensible about what they're doing, able to preserve what's kind of there that we want to keep, like trees.
And this is just really our attempt. You know, our zoning ordinance was created for the first time in 1950, and the way people live and their needs today very different.
Arlington's changed quite a bit since the 50s.
The world has changed. So this is really just one step in providing a different range of options, which can really serve a variety of public policy goals. This can allow options for people who are older, mobility impaired. Maybe you know, this is a form of supplemental income. Maybe they in fact inhabit the accessory dwelling while renting out the main house. Perhaps this becomes a way for people to, you know, get in on the Arlington rental market at a way that's a little less expensive than it is, for example, living in a high-rise apartment. So this range of options, you know, I think we believe is what's going to allow our community to grow comfortably.
Yeah, you know, and even an added thing is you could have like an older people, they could continue to live in their home, but have, you know, someone who helps them out in the smaller. I mean, people's lives are so different, all different, and this is just to add flexibility to help people do what they need to do to live here in Arlington.
Was there any concern about this kind of changing the character of the single-family neighborhoods?
Indeed. That was certainly a concern that we heard from people, and I think this solution, if you will, what we did was really responsive to a lot of those concerns. As Libby mentioned, 5 feet away from the property line is significantly different than 1. And that's something that we think is important for a neighbor's house. But it's also important really to maintain the integrity of that accessory dwelling. If you're only 1 foot away from someone else's fence, you really can't maintain that building, right? So this really kind of makes sense from a public policy standpoint. And in terms of character, you know, the funny thing is we have this dynamic in many Arlington neighborhoods. People have accessory buildings up to 1 foot away from the property line. So for people who are going to be building new, in fact, it's not going to be functionally any different. In fact, we think it's going to be improved because it's going to be better placed on lots. And as Ms. Garvey said, it's hopefully going to allow for the preservation of trees either on your property or on your neighbor's property. So we think that this is a good way to move forward. That said, we'll study it. We'll see how it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, lot coverage still, you know, all of the rules we've got there, that still will obtain. it's possible people will build slightly smaller houses instead of a big, huge one. Yeah, mine too. And then a small, unit behind, and instead of one big, huge monster house. So, we'll see how it works. But it would seem really important to get some flexibility and allow just a lot of different ways of doing things. So
and how does this all fit in with the Housing Arlington initiative that a lot of people are talking about these days?
Well, indeed. And when you talk about one of our key challenges with affordable housing, it's really that there's not enough diversity in our housing types that could be affordable for people at different price ranges. If most of your new construction is either a tear down of an existing home and building a huge home in its place, or a luxury development on a metro line 20 stories up that rents for $3,000 a month, what's the new stock for people who are not in either one of those scenarios? Yeah. And we've had very little, and this is a way to get some of that housing stock. Now that said, we're not going to see thousands of these overnight, since we've had accessory dwellings as an allowed use of your home. We've only had somewhere around 30, so we're not talking about significant numbers to scale, but anything that we can do to create more options is better than we would have been.
And a lot of times a younger couple, they're having, it's tight to do the mortgage. They'll buy, and then they can rent out, either the dwelling inside the unit or the one in back, which helps cover their mortgage, which is two things. It helps them live here and have housing, and it helps the people here have a reasonable rent to stay someplace.
Exactly.
So I think it's good. We'll continue to study it, and I think Christian's right. It's not going to be like this massive explosion.
We're not going to have a whole new city of tiny houses.
No,
right. And we didn't say anything goes. So we'll continue. We will continue to look at it and adapt as we need to.